Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I want to do some Enoki, some Flammulina velutipes. I actually have a couple different strains we're going to play with, and I want to do some mad science experiments that I've been meaning to try. Enoki and I have kind of had a torrid love affair. It was one of the first mushrooms I ever grew on supplemented sawdust. I did like 20% wheat bran. Did some bags in the pressure cooker. Didn't really know what I was doing. Probably lost like half of my grow due to the contamination because I really didn't know what I was doing. But the other bags, the bags that colonized, just made these beautiful golden enoki mushrooms, and I was hooked, man. That was like, this is awesome. Later I switched to the pasteurized fuel pellet method just because it was so much easier and I had a lot more success with it with other species. But the enoki has just defied me on the pasteurized fuel pellets. I don't know if it's the wood type I'm using. I suspect that it's the lack of supplementation. I think they really like a substrate with bran in it. And I can't really do that kind of supplementation with the pasteurized method or else you'll get contamination. So we're going to do some mad science experiments today. The first one, like I said, I have two strains I'm going to grow. And what I want to try doing is I want to try fruiting them off a straight grain. I'm going to try brown rice first, and what I'm going to do is like a mycelium flood method, similar to what I did in my cordyceps video, and we're not going to do any pressure cooker sterilization other than the spawn I've already made. I have wheat spawn fully colonized with both strains, and that obviously was run in the pressure cooker. But what we're going to do is we're going to do some brown rice in the rice cooker, and we're going to do the mycelium flood method, where once the brown rice is hydrated, cooks, and it cools, we're going to pour in 300 mils of liquid culture with the enoki, and we're going to also add a quart of pre-colonized grain spawn. So with the cordyceps, all I do is the liquid culture. Basically, I do the rice in the cooker, and I just add the liquid culture, and that covers the rice, and that's enough for colonization. The enoki is a little slower. So I'm thinking, I'm concerned about contamination if I just use straight liquid culture. So I'm going to go ahead and do the liquid culture and get all that good stuff in there. But I'm also going to add some pre-colonized grain to kind of give it a boost and hopefully prevent any contamination. And then we're going to move it to some containers I have that are going to be conducive, I think, to growing enoki. And I'll show you guys those later. But right now we're going to get the rice cooker rolling. Here's our setup. I already have 1 liter of brown rice in the cooker, and to that I'm going to add 1 quart of distilled water, but I'm going to add some couple supplements. I just have 30 grams of dextrose and 3 grams of soy peptone weighed up there. So I'm going to dump that into our quart of water. This is my basic method for the mycelium flood method. I always go, I just have this container that's measured out into quarts, liters, whatever, and I do a liter of brown rice to a quart of nutrient broth. So we have our supplements pretty mixed up. My peptone's getting kind of chunky because it's getting old, but it'll work fine. It'll all cook in there. So pour our nutrient broth in with our rice. I always take a spoon and just kind of level everything out. Good enough. So we'll close our cooker, get it running. So basically it runs itself. So you just hit brown rice and you want to turn off this keep warm function. We don't want that on. You got to make sure you turn that off or else your grains on the bottom will get too mushy, and we don't want that. So she's kicking on. It's going to take about 45 minutes, and this rice will be perfectly cooked. Our rice cooker just kicked off, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull the pot out, and I'm going to sit it right in front of the flow hood there. And I always sit it on a canning jar ring. That'll keep it off the table. You don't want to melt your table, obviously. And then I'm just going to give it a stir, and then we're going to have to leave it sit to cool down, which is probably going to take about 45 minutes or so, half hour, 45 minutes. Our rice is all cooled down, so this is going to be really simple. We're just going to add a quart of colonized wheat grain and 300 mils of nice chunky liquid culture. So I'm going to pour the liquid culture in, stir it up, add the wheat, and then we basically just have to let it sit in front of the flow hood and dry to field capacity. So it's going to take several hours to dry out back to field capacity where I want it to be to pack into the containers. What I've found is with this method is that letting it sit in front of the flow hood for several hours, you know, talking 3-4 hours, is not going to hurt you, but it definitely will if you pack it into the containers too soon and your sub's too wet. Alright guys, that's it. I'm going to stir it about once an hour, and we're probably going to let it go about 3-4 hours until it's nice and dried out, and then we'll pack it into our containers. These are the containers I'm going to be using. My rice is almost ready here, and these are just food storage containers, and it's kind of nice they're graduated in ounces, cups, milliliters too, which is kind of handy. They have a screw top lid, and I just picked these up at Dollar General. They were only about $1 a piece. I got quite a few of them, and then I just drilled a 1/4-inch hole in the top and added one of our micropose filter discs. So I'm thinking I'm gonna need maybe 3 or 4 of these, so I'll probably get 4, and I'll spray them down with rubbing alcohol and let them dry in front of the flow hood. Once they're all dry, we'll go ahead and pack them with our sub. Got our 4 jars filled up here of our Appalachian Gold Enoki. You can see I didn't fill them all the way to the top. They're about 1 inch below the lip. So hopefully I'll be able to see any pinning when it starts. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Do 4 more containers of the mycelium emporium strain. And we'll let them run and be able to compare the two. Just a quick update on our Enoki grow. Our jars are actually looking really good. They're starting to white up really nicely. You can tell the cakes are actually pulling away from the surface of the jars a little bit, which is an indicator that, you know, the mycelium of the Enoki is kind of starting to digest that rice. And I'm hoping for some fruiting soon. I'm keeping a close eye on these. Both strains are nice and whited up at this point. And pretty soon I'm going to move them to fruiting. You can still kind of see those dark wheat kernels in there a little bit, but they're starting to fade just because they're getting totally covered in mycelium. Okay, it is time for an update on our Enoki cakes. Unfortunately, our mycelium emporium wild strain cakes are no longer with us. They have been removed to the compost pile. What happened is those 4 cakes, once I took off the lids and tried to move them to fruiting, they just got a ton of metabolite in the containers, and they were trying to pin a little bit on the sides, but really anemically, and they just weren't looking good. So I just decided to compost them. That does not mean by any means that that's a bad strain. Enoki naturally grow on wood, so I'm sure that strain would do really well on like supplemented sawdust, but it may just not be as adaptive to our crazy substrate experiment we're doing here. But the Appalachian Gold warm strain, they are doing better. They are proving their versatility. So I have 4 cakes in each tub here. I basically just have them in Sterilite tubs with the lids on. Obviously, I just took them off. But I don't have any polyfill in the holes. So there is a ton of air coming in and out of these tubs. And the humidity is holding around 50% or so in each tub, because it is fairly dry down here this time of year. We're in the middle of winter. And just to check here, we are running between 64 and 63 degrees and really low humidity down here right now. So what I've done is I just have some thin cloth. It's basically like t-shirt material, and I'm just keeping it moist, and I'm covering the containers with that. And I'm having to re-moisten the cloth like once a day because they are drying out. But I'm trying to give them some more air exchange, but also keep the humidity basically at saturation at the surface of the cake. And it seems to be working pretty well so far with this strain anyway. I'll take the cloth back. You can see we're starting to get some nice pins. You can see here, this one's blowing up pretty good. You can see where the top of the cake is cracking. This one's a little behind, just starting to pin. But typically where it cracks is where your pins are going to appear. This back. This cake here is kind of pinning all over. That one's more around the edges. High humidity areas, that's fairly common. Over here, kind of the same thing. Some cakes are a little further behind others. This one's blowing up over here, obviously. This one not as much yet. Hopefully it will. And check these out. These are a little behind, but starting to get some nice clusters as well. So hopefully they all continue pinning really well. I'm hoping the surface kind of fills up more with some more pins. I am trying to encourage the traditional like Japanese style enoki with the longer stems and the smaller caps. And the cakes I'm noticing are shrinking quite a bit as they're starting to fruit. So they're sinking down and pulling away from the container. And that should pool CO2 in the container and encourage that type of growth. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep the cloths on there until the pins reach that level. And at that point, I'll have to switch it up a little bit. Enoki update time. It's been about 5 days since that last video clip, and I've actually moved 2 of the cakes to what I'm calling fruiting conditions. Again, I'm considering this completely experimental grow, so I'm playing with different things and just seeing how they do. But what I did is these 2 cakes are growing pretty good. The other ones are a little behind over there. I basically just took a couple deli containers that I cut the bottoms out of and made collars out of them. And then I'm covering the top of the collar with the same t-shirt material and just keeping that moist once, twice a day, whatever it needs. And again, just leaving the polyfill out of the holes, allowing a lot of air exchange into the actual container. But the moist t-shirt material over the top of the collars should be keeping it nice and moist. And hopefully this will pool the CO2, and we'll see how tall we can get them to grow. Let me remove the collars here. Get you a close up. You can see these are actually above the top of the rim of the initial grow container at this point. So we got some nice flushes there going. It's kind of just coming off the edge of one side of the cake. I'm thinking maybe next time what I need to do is take a fork and scrape the top of the cake before I try and initiate fruiting. I'm thinking that'll get maybe a more even pin set. I'll show you the other ones here. So these are pinning as well, but they're just a little behind. You can see you getting a really nice pin set, but again, it's kind of focused all around the outside of the container and a little bit on top, some more than others. But I'm thinking scratching the surface before I initiate pinning will get a more even pin set. Again, these are a little further behind, but still making pins. And same with these back here. So some of the cakes are still making a lot of metabolite slash excess moisture in the bottom of the containers. So what I've been doing is just every couple days, if I start to see the moisture metabolite pooling in the bottom of the jars, I'm just dumping that off carefully on a paper towel. Basically, I'm just kind of like laying them carefully sideways and letting the moisture kind of roll out of them, because I don't want to damage pins. And obviously the cakes have shrunk up quite a bit now at this point, and you can actually pretty easily dump the cake right out of the container, which I do, at least for this grow, want to keep them into the container. So as these pins elevate past the lid of the initial grow container, I'll be putting collars on these as well and moving them over to the same fruiting conditions that I have the other two in. All right, boys and girls, we finally made it to Enoki harvest time, and look at these beautiful mushrooms. I wasn't really sure what to expect trying to fruit these off straight grain, but it worked pretty well. And without sterilizing the substrate, especially just going rice Cooker Tek, fairly easy grow, really. Especially if you don't have a pressure cooker and you want a way to try and grow these, it worked out pretty well. 7 out of the 8 cakes have really nice flushes on them. This one's just kind of hanging back, growing kind of anemically, not really sure why. But these other cakes have some beautiful flushes. I think if you tweak the technique a little bit, like we talked about earlier, roughen up the surface of the cake before you initiate pinning, I think you'd get a more even pin set versus just getting the, kind of fruiting off the side interface of the jar there, like a lot of them did. I think you could actually do, like some small scale commercial runs this way and get enough to be worth it. But I actually have stir fry on the menu tonight, so that's what these are going into. I am going to try these on this particular strain on sawdust as well, just to see how it compares. Obviously, supplemented sawdust is the standard growth medium for these in the US anyway. But what have we learned from this experiment? A couple things. For one, genetics matters. And it took me a while to realize this when I was growing mushrooms. Having a awesome culture, strong genetics really does make a huge difference. Certain strains are going to be more conducive to certain grow situations and are going to be more versatile. And this warm strain from Appalachian Gold is just kick-ass. I don't know what else to say about it. I've tried probably a dozen different Enoki cultures over the years, trying different techniques, and this one just blows them all out of the water. So really excited to try some other things with this. Also, the laying the cloth, the real light cloth, the t-shirt material over the top when you're doing container grows like this, that worked great. I would definitely do that again. That was my first time trying that. You want to use, I think, a real thin kind of material so it can breathe a little bit, and also that'll let some light through. And if you keep that moist, it keeps the surface of your cake moist, but allows some extra fresh air exchange. And I really thought I got a nice pin set and nice fruiting by using that technique. And then we put the collars on to try and get the stems to extend a little bit, which they did. So I got some good sharp scissors here and scale out. So I'm going to show you guys, I got kind of a cool technique I came up with for picking these. So let's get picking. So it can be a little tricky with these cakes in these containers like this to pick them off without damaging the mushrooms. Caps especially are a little brittle. So what I like to use is this is just a bamboo shish kebab skewer. What I do is go right down into the middle of that cake, like so. Make like a gnocchi sickle, and then you can just invert the container and pop it right out. And then you have your cake. Some beautiful mushrooms there. You can see how they really kind of pinned along the edge of the jar and kind of grew up from there. So just like to pick them with some good sharp scissors and just trim them off right into your container. It can be really tedious picking these enoki. You know, if you try and pick them one by one, it's like maddening. So it's a really easy way to pretty much pick a whole cake in about 10 seconds. So that's it. This is the last cake here. You see I got some really nice mushrooms there. But again, you can see where they really pinned big time along the side and the jar interface there. So that's why I'm thinking that scratching the surface of the mycelium when you initiate pinning probably will increase your yields and you'll get a better, more even pin set. But just about done here, and we can get a final weight. It's been a while since I ate these. I'm pretty excited about it, actually. One of my favorite mushrooms. I do find them in the wild around here as well. They usually grow on dead elm, and I usually find them when I'm looking for mycelium in the fall, like September, October. But yeah, look at those clusters. There's some beautiful clusters, and the stems on these are delicious as well. The whole mushroom is edible, and not only are they delicious, but they have some awesome medicinal properties too in terms of immune system health and cellular health. So here we go. Probably not a huge yield, but some nice looking mushrooms. Okay, so we're a little over a pound. I know this strainer weighs about 7 ounces, so that means we have 9 ounces or so of beautiful golden enoki. So not huge yields by any means, but kind of a cool way to grow these. It was a really interesting experiment. I learned a lot. This is an amazing strain, and I can't wait to play with it some more. So I'm going to put these in some stir fry, and I'm looking forward to that. I have a few mushroom recipes that I love that are killer, but I feel like I need to expand my repertoire. So if you have an enoki recipe that you want to share, I'd love to hear about it in comments, and I will catch you next video.